right, welcome everybody. I see got a number of folks entering the webinar. It's good to see you all. Thank you for being here. If you would, as you are joining us, go ahead and open up your chat box there. And I'd love to see where people are coming from. Since we can't actually see you in the webinar setup like this, I'd love to just see people's names and where you're coming from. So if you would just type into the chat and share your name and where either in New Jersey or around the country you might be joining us from. If you want to include any details about your school or anything else like that, we'd love to see that in there. So thank you. Excellent. We've got Jersey City, Trenton, Hoboken, awesome. Hamilton, great. South Plainfield, a few Jersey City folks here today. Excellent. Randolph, New Brunswick. Great. Welcome everybody. Thanks for being here. West New York. Awesome.
It's all New Jersey so far, Jesse.
Yeah, a lot of New Jersey folks. Oh, Jackie Mardikian, great to see you in here. Facilitator at Good Grief. Thanks for being here. Awesome. Montclair, Union City. People's Prep in Newark, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Cool. All right, we're just going to give it a couple more minutes till we get started, just to allow time for people to join. Excellent. All right, if you're just joining us, we've got people typing into the chat just to let us know where you're coming from. And if you want to share any information about your school or organization that you work for, that would be great. Princey joining from New Jersey, wanting to be a facilitator at Good Grief. Awesome, we'd love to have you. Great experience. Hun School is here, welcome, Angela. Washington Township, awesome. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started, just so that we are mindful of our time and we leave plenty of time at the end for our Q&A. So my name is Jesse Bassett and I'm the Director of Education at Good Grief. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really am grateful that you've taken the time out of your day to learn more about this program and the work that we're doing through Good Grief Schools. I am joined today by my colleague, Paul Breda. Paul, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself to everybody? If you unmute yourself, Paul, you're muted. There we go.
I'll tell you what, I'm on Zoom all day long and I still mute myself when I shouldn't be. And I probably should mute myself more often when I... But my name is Paul Breda, and I'm glad to be here with you and appreciate everybody's time. I'm School Partnerships Manager with Good Grief, and I engage with school districts in New Jersey and throughout the region and the country. And I see Canada's even joined us, so I'd be happy to engage with Canada in bringing these programs to the different schools and into the districts. So I've been involved with primarily New Jersey education for the past 20 years, and I couldn't be happier for being at Good Grief. So that's a little about me.
Thanks for being here, Paul. And I'm going to take the front half of this presentation, but then Paul is going to talk a little bit more in detail about the different program components in the second half. So you will hear more from Paul here in a few minutes. Just a few housekeeping notes before we get started. We are recording this session, and so that we can post this, so you can access it later, reference back to it. You could share it with colleagues. Also for the folks who maybe signed up and weren't able to join us today. So we are recording it. We will be posting it to our YouTube page, and we will share that out with you, the link to it, following this session. So just be aware that we are recording the session. And a couple of other kind of housekeeping notes. As I mentioned, just to go through what we're going to be sharing today, my main objective is to share about the Good Grief Schools program and its different components, but I'm going to do a little bit of work on the front end, talking about why a program like this exists, what our goals are, what we are trying, the need we are trying to meet. And so that's where we'll start our conversation today. If you have questions, please hang on to them. We are going to leave plenty of time for questions at the end. We're going to try to leave about 20 minutes or so for Q&A. So if you have some specific questions about your school setting or about the program, get ready to put those into the Q&A box. That's the best place to get those questions. So you should see that button on the little Zoom bar there on the bottom of your screen. But along the way, if you want to be asking questions and things like that, making comments in the chat, we will try to pay attention to the chat and respond to those as best we can. If we don't get to a question that you asked because we have too many of them, please don't take that personally. We're just going to try to answer as many as we can in the time that we have, but we also want to be mindful of the time that we've set aside for today. And we are planning to end this session by 4 o'clock. So let's go ahead and dive in. Again, I'm going to start by talking about some of the rationale for this program, why it exists, the need that we're trying to address, and we'll talk about specific program components that are available to you. But first and foremost, I do want to introduce all of you to Good Grief. So for those who are new to us, Good Grief, we're a nonprofit organization that's been around in New Jersey since 2004. Our mission is to build resilience in children, strengthen families, and empower communities to grow from loss and adversity. For most of the organization's history, we've been providing free and unlimited peer support programs to grieving kids and families, starting with kids as young as 3 years old through young adulthood, age 30, and their primary caregivers. In recent years, our work has been growing through education and advocacy to provide training, curriculum, and resources in schools and in places like the funeral industry, corporate workplaces, and other spaces to empower professionals, parents, and the broader community to support the needs of children facing adversity. And the program that we are here today to talk to you about was really started back in 2017 when we recruited a committee of educators to help us to identify needs that existed within the school community related to grief, loss, and resilience. And through that committee, we developed this program, which has continued to evolve after we spent a couple of years piloting some initial curriculum and training in a couple of schools in the area. And we piloted this program in public and private schools, in rural and urban settings, with a wide range of students. And we learned a lot from this process. And we formally launched the program back in January of 2020, which feels like a lifetime ago, before the pandemic began. And to date, we have partnered, I'm really proud to say, with over 130 schools throughout New Jersey, even dipping into New York and parts of Pennsylvania, to provide various aspects of this program. We are continuing to evaluate the program through lots of different things, and I can talk more about that, but I am excited to share that we've been even conducting a human research study with one of our partner districts this spring, so that we can continue to share some great information about the program and its impact. So beyond the program you're going to hear about today and our work with families who've experienced grief and loss, we provided a number of other services to the community around childhood bereavement. I'm not going to go into all of those, but I would just encourage you to check out our website. I'm just going to type that into the chat. It's www.good-grief.org. We run things like an annual summer camp, an annual spring institute, offer a variety of other professional development workshops and trainings, lots of other things. So check out the website, some great resources on there. I'd encourage you to just click around it and see what you might be interested in. All right. So childhood bereavement. As a starting point, when we were looking at the need for this program and what it would fulfill, we were looking at childhood grief. This is kind of the core of the organization's mission. And we know from the data in the field that about 1 in 14 students will experience the death of a parent or a sibling, so an immediate family member, by the age of 18. And about 90%, it's estimated, will experience a significant loss of another person in their life, a family member, a friend, a relative, a mentor, someone like that, before graduating from high school. And when students experience loss, they are at a greater risk for a host of negative educational and health outcomes, including decline in academic performance, increased isolation, feelings of disconnectedness, as well as increased stress, anxiety, and more. And as we started to dig into surveys and studies that have been conducted, we also learned that about 92% of educators, including teachers, aides, counselors, and other faculty, say that childhood grief is a serious problem that deserves more attention from schools. Educators say that they often desire, but oftentimes lack the knowledge and resources needed to support grieving students in their midst, which is oftentimes the greatest barrier preventing them from reaching out and offering support. And so that's one of the needs that we are trying to address through this program. And these stats that I mentioned, 1 in 14, these come from the folks over at Judy's house at the JAG Institute. They're based in Denver, Colorado. They are pretty active in our field in terms of publishing a lot of research and statistics around rates of childhood bereavement. And here is a resource pulled from their website that breaks down childhood bereavement rates state by state. I'm sharing this in part because I know we have a lot of people from New Jersey, but folks from other areas of the country. And this is a really great resource for you if you're looking for some good data to put forward in an ask for a grant or something like that for funds to support a program like this. So I would really encourage you to check out their website. They have some great resources on there, and I'm going to go ahead and put that into the chat. And I just wanted to show this New Jersey map as an example. On the New Jersey map here, you can see they even go down state by state. They have statewide reports, and you can look at childhood bereavement rates county by county. And again, a really great resource if you were looking to look for funds at a local foundation or something like that. That would be a powerful case statement as to why a program like this might be needed. So I encourage you to check them out. But beyond just death, we know that there are many students facing significant losses and adversities every single day, and that these experiences impact things that I mentioned before: school performance, health, and overall well-being. And this data comes from the Adverse Childhood Experiences study and the other studies that have followed from it. So many different adversities, and I know many of you are aware of this research and the work in the field, but things like addiction, loss of home or moving, broken relationships and divorce, loss of safety and security, incarceration, poverty, neglect, family separation, racism and oppression, among others. And the research has shown that about 3 out of 5 students will face one of these hardships or more before they graduate from high school. And 80% of students who live with one of these adversities will be exposed to at least one more. And 50% of students who are exposed to one of these adversities will be exposed to 3 or more. So childhood adversity does have a way of piling up in young people's lives, and the research shows this. So if it ever feels like the world can be a very unfair place to some kids, data would suggest that can be true. And these are some of those risk factors, and lots of different reasons these risk factors exist. We go into a lot of this in our trainings, but essentially, especially kids who have been exposed to multiple adversities in early childhood, they're at greater risk for higher rates of obesity and diabetes and heart disease, developmental delays, as I've mentioned before, drops in performance in school, chronic stress, addiction, and even self-harming behaviors. It's really important for me to say that this is not a death warrant for young people. This isn't their future necessarily. The research is very clear on that. These are risk factors, but it's also clear that this is a call to action that we should take seriously in order to support our students through loss and adversity in their lives. And that's what we're trying to do through this program. Now, beyond these adverse childhood experiences, beyond death that our students have faced before the COVID-19 pandemic began, it would be really irresponsible of me not to bring up the really challenging year that we've all faced. We find ourselves within a context where many of our students are facing adversity, stress, and loss that some have not experienced before. And for those who have been exposed to other significant adversities in their lives, this is another one to add to the scale that is weighing on their health, their well-being, and on their learning. This pandemic has amplified the need for social and emotional supports in schools. I think we're all aware of this. And I just want to share a few stats with you this was a nationwide survey that was conducted by the New York Life Foundation after the pandemic had been going on for a few months, that speaks to the need specifically around resources for bereavement and diversity in schools. Of the educators surveyed, 26% reported that a member of their school community, including direct family members of students, teachers, or staff, had died from COVID-19. Nearly all educators surveyed, 95%, agreed that social and emotional support has never been more important than it is now. 75% of respondents reported that COVID-19 had opened their eyes to the immense impact of grief and loss. And 93% believe that the traumatic effects will be felt long term. Nearly all educators, 95%, say that they would like to do more to help grieving students. However, only 15% of educators surveyed said that they felt comfortable addressing students' emotional needs, including anxiety, grief, and/or trauma that have been caused or intensified by the coronavirus outbreak. So this program was not built with COVID-19 in mind. We could have never predicted it, but we believe that we were built for moments like this to support the social, emotional, and mental health needs of students, faculty, and parents who have experienced significant loss and adversity in their lives during this year. So let me now just talk about a little bit the focus of this program, and I'm going to hand it over to Paul to speak to the different program components. So when we were building the program, we wanted to create a program that focused on building up proactive, positive skills in students and faculty and parents to build resiliency. We really wanted this program to build that kind of prevention-based support. And so when we went through all the literature and the research and we were creating the program, we really boiled down to kind of building resilience to two main components: building up supportive relationships and adaptive skills. So supportive relationships with people like teachers and coaches and mentors and others, to give them the confidence and the language and some of the interpersonal skills to be responsive to students facing adversity. And then we wanted to teach students in classrooms and in groups skills like mindful awareness, emotion regulation, healthy coping strategies, building up their sense of character and purpose and empathy, all to try to build collective resiliency in the school setting. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Paul, who's going to walk you all through some specific components of the program.
Okay, thank you, Jesse. So with that as a background, and from the work of the original education committee that was formed to develop this program, these are the program goals that emerged. And Jesse's already named some of these. Increased use of adaptive strategies, and Jesse mentioned these. Enhanced connectedness in the school environment. And again, that's a big deal right now, because that connectedness with the school has, in most cases during the pandemic, been largely lost. Even teachers don't really know, and support staff often don't know what's happening in the home, which is where the instruction's being delivered now. So we have a lot of making up to do when it comes to connectedness and getting back to that school environment. Increasing confidence and the belief in your ability to be resilient through challenging circumstances. So what Carol Dweck might call a growth mindset in children. Increase self-help seeking behaviors among students who are struggling, and build a shared language, normalize talking about difficult subjects. And that is, really something that a lot of kids and even some adults struggle with as well. So Jesse mentioned 4 components of our school-based program. These are the components I'm going to walk you through. Good grief groups, roots to resilience, and parent education and professional development. So good grief groups. This first program is an extension of the work that we've been doing since 2004 with grieving children and families. It's a grief support group program for students who have experienced the death of an important person in their life. So this can be a family member, but it could be also a friend, relative, a teacher. To qualify, the student simply needs to express that it was an important relationship to them and they want support. You can start these groups with as few as 3, but we recommend no more than 12 students. And the groups meet consecutively for nine weeks in the school. Timing is based around the context of your school and around your school schedule. So some of these groups might meet at lunch. They could meet after school. Some schools have a social emotional time set aside in the school day. So that's basically something, of course, that you can fully control when and how it's delivered. We provide you with curriculum that includes a facilitator script, activities, worksheets, and etc. So the curriculum is separated in 2 large groups, elementary and middle school, high school. These sessions are recommended for 60 minutes. And here are the topics that are covered in the Good Grief groups. Go ahead. There we go. Thank you. So what we do is we train your staff. Ideally, these are student support staff, counselors, social workers. We provide training that covers the foundations of childhood bereavement and grief-informed practices to support students. Just basic group facilitation skills. And of course, what we know as best practices for our program's implementation. We are delivering this now virtually, typically in 2.5 hour sessions or so. And they can be separated by a week or a day. We'll work through all that, whatever works best for you and your staff. We recommend 2 facilitators be trained per school for this program. And after you've been trained, we provide these program materials and we help you get it off the ground. You're going to see a lot of commonality in how this is delivered in the Roots to Resilience program, but we do also have monthly partner meetings for ongoing support. So that's a scheduled once a month online event where if you're engaged in this program as a facilitator and you want to talk to other facilitators, have some questions answered, go over best practices, that's something that we do once a month through these partner meetings. So let's think about then the success of the program. We've been tracking the success based on what the kids tell us. And if we think back to our program goals, some of the things like helping kids learn words to describe their feelings, that kind of goes back to building that shared language and to make grief kind of a school's an informed workplace where grief is understood. 90% report that good grief helped them learn it is important to take care of themselves. So that relates to those adaptive strategies that Jesse described. Good grief helps them find the people, those supportive relationships that help them get through grief and learn how to be more kind and empathetic to others. So these are some numbers that we're very proud of. So the second program I'll describe as Roots to Resilience. This is for a more wider population of students. It's a more proactive program. It draws heavily on the research around resilient life skills that help children and teenagers thrive through adversity and loss. And some of that would include the Harvard University Center on the Developing Child that has a lot of great information, a lot of informative research is referenced there on helping children and specific skills and tactics that they will need. Good Grief provides a 5-week curriculum with detailed lesson plans and activities that you would deliver once a week. The sessions for elementary are recommended to run 35 to 45 minutes, 45 to 60 minutes for middle and high school. We break this program into finer grade bands, K2, 3, 5, 6, 8, and 9, 12. So we're going to focus here on building those adaptive skills, the shared language, and a sense of safety to seek help from others. Now, when we built the program, these are the 5 components that we selected. There may be others that would be likewise supportive, but these are the 5 components of the program that you will teach after the training. So we combine building a knowledge base of some of the psychosocial aspects of adversity with skill building and practice. Again, Jesse also mentioned that we've been adding to the program specifically to address isolation and loneliness due to COVID-19. So this is an ongoing work in progress from the aspect of being current. Educator training, again, we train the facilitators in 5 hours, again, breaking it up to 2 virtual sessions, covering the foundations of childhood adversity, toxic stress, trauma-informed practices that building resilience. We recommend 1 faculty for every 2 to 3 classes trained to teach. So for every 2 or 3 classes that you're going to conduct, we'd like to have at least 1 faculty person trained. And again, we provide the lesson plans, the activities, the worksheets after you've been trained. So we help launch the program, hand it over to you, and for you to administer and to schedule in your school day. So again, we like to talk about the results we see from children and tie it back to our program goals. The first one, reporting on an increased understanding of resilient competencies. So basically, in our language, we're talking about adaptive strategies for children. It's understanding the skills that they need to be resilient. 95% report an increased understanding of the impact of loss and adversity. And 95% report an increased understanding of healthy coping options that increase confidence in their ability to be resilient. And 96% report that the lessons were helpful to them. So this is the piece where we provide professional development to educators. This is a long-term type of a program. In other words, it's not reacting to any specific situation necessarily, but basically helping your staff be more prepared to face the grief or loss and adversity that your students come to school with, and help support them through that. So this is building a culture of empathy and support in response to that loss and adversity. And we focus on the training on grief and trauma-informed practices. We deliver the workshops virtually recently, of course, but we have in the past, and we hope to get back to being able to also deliver that in your school. And the typical virtual sessions last from 1 to 2 hours, but we can also talk about a series of workshops perhaps that share a common theme. All of this would be built around the context of your particular school. So they're not really off-the-shelf programs as much as they are working with you to understand the context of your school and what would most benefit your educators. Parent education workshops. We can't always assume, and as educators, you know that we can't always assume that parents have all the skills that they need even to help students get through loss and adversity. So these workshops are designed to help them help their children develop that sense of resilience. Again, we can develop a workshop around the context of your community. 1 to 2 hours on a weekday evening is one way that we could deliver it. We could also talk about full day training for skill building and practice.
Can I add one thing to that, Paul?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, so this year, a cool thing that we kind of integrated into the program that's connected to Roots to Resilience, but we also can link people to it when they go through parent education is we put together a few parent education webinars with some home modules that um, gave parents a resource to teach their kids some of these adaptive skills at home. So things like mindfulness, emotion regulation, etc. And so that's a really great resource. It's made available through this program where they can go on, watch a short webinar that explains it, and they download a little PDF that includes activities. So in the mindfulness example, how to teach your kids to build a practice of mindfulness from deep breathing, and gives them some specific activity examples they could do with their kids and ideas for how to implement it. So a great way for parents to kind of continue that practice and start to integrate some of this stuff into their daily lives at home.
So what I'm hoping for as a result of this program this afternoon is that I'll hear from you and we'll be able to talk about how these programs would work in your schools. And you should know that we do charge a fee for the program. The fees consist of for training and the annual use of the program material and the monthly partner meeting. So what we would do is we'd talk about whether this is going to be a school-based or district-based rollout, and based upon your needs and what we determine to work best moving forward, we would develop a quote for you. And something that if you're not already hearing about, you might be hearing the acronym ESSER. So we've added SR2 now to our list of acronyms for education. In December, the Federal Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act was signed into law and provided an additional $54.3 billion nationwide for elementary and secondary school emergency relief fund. That's ESSER2. In the state of New Jersey, those applications become available March 15th. The deadline to submit an application is May 14th. So within this legislation, there is a real acknowledgement of the importance of mental health supports in terms of reopening the schools and re-entry. So, and that's a good thing to see. The minimum allocation for mental health in New Jersey is $45,000 per district, which is not a lot of money in some districts. It's a lot of money in some other districts, but there's increasingly money available for this. And also, we also would work with you if necessary to help you find funds. We've done that as well. So good news on the funding front.
Yeah. Excellent. So I just want to pause there and go ahead and open it up for questions. If you would, click on the Q&A box. That's the best tool for us to keep track of the questions. The chat can be hard to keep track of. So if you can click on the Q&A box and type your questions into there, that would be great. One thought I had, Paul, as you were talking, is I don't think we put this information will be sent as a follow-up email from you to everybody who attended, and even folks who registered and didn't attend. It'll have your contact info in it. But do you want to go ahead and type into the chat for anybody who would want it, Paul, your email, and
Sure.
if people wanted to reach out to you right away before they get an email from you tomorrow.
And the answer to the first question I do see in the chat, there was a submission date that opens up March 15th. And it concludes, the deadline to submit the application is what does that say, May 21st? May 14th.
May 14th.
I think that's what was being asked there. Yep.
Yeah. Thanks for the question, Lynn. And I think we did, somebody else asked for the previous slide again, and we did that. And I did, just so you all know, but you can reference this again, I'll send it out one more time. I did put the link to where those funds in the chat. So go ahead and check out that link. All right, so there's a question from Jody about how long on average does it take to get a program up and running in a school or a school district? Great question, Jody. I would say each instance is very different depending on the size of the district, depending on the scope of the project. Just to give a couple of examples, there's some districts that just choose to implement professional development. And that's something we can turn around really quickly and deliver for you. We had a district reach out this week who wanted some PD with us, and we were able to turn that around fairly quickly because we had open time. So it really does depend on the project. If you were going to implement Good Grief Groups or Roots to Resilience program, I would say it usually takes us probably a couple of weeks to process the paperwork and then get your training scheduled.
Jesse, your sound, you're not coming through. Yeah, we've kind of lost the sound. You're sounding very distant. I think that's going to be better.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, better.
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry about that. So I was just saying, Jody, it takes typically a couple of weeks for us to not coming through.
We've lost you again. Yeah.
Paul, do you want to go ahead and start answering this question?
Yeah. Let me see what I can do with that. So we're going to work with you to schedule the training. The first part of this is the training piece of your staff, and so the implementation after you've been trained is really whatever your school schedule allows and how you want to roll that out. So Jesse is the one who does that training, so he knows more about the ins and outs of the training itself, but it can be done relatively quickly depending upon how soon we can do the training together.
Is that better, Paul?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't think I'd really add anything to that, Paul. I think one thing to think about with, let's say, the Good Grief Groups program is we're already, into March of this year, but that doesn't mean that you can't get started on the program. The partnership agreement is for a year. So I work with districts to, reduce the length of a Good Grief Groups program from 9 weeks to shorter to fit it within, this spring, if that's something you're interested in doing, and then you can pick that group back up in the fall and start that group again at the beginning of the next school year. So if that's something you're concerned about, that's something we can work with you on. Okay, there was a question about our YouTube page. The YouTube page is going to get linked out in the email that we're going to send to everybody who attended. You can actually just search for us. I don't have the link to the YouTube page right now, but you can just search Good Grief on YouTube and you'll find us. And there's a whole stream, a playlist of all of our webinars that you can find on there. So there's a question about choosing which part of the program we want to implement. Yes, so basically you get to choose. We have the 4 components. I'll just go back to that. Good Grief Groups, so that's the grief support group for students. That's a 9-week program. Roots to Resilience, the social and emotional learning program for all students. Professional development, parent education. So it's kind of like a menu of options. We obviously recommend, because we think that each of these components is kind of, critical part of the program to use them all. But we work with each school to kind of determine the need. So that's why it's really great to connect with Paul or myself in a meeting to talk about the specifics of your school or district, because we can make recommendations and help you to make those decisions. But you can essentially pick of the 4 components which ones you want to implement.
Jesse, in the chat, there's a request to share the slide where you shared the topics covered in our groups. So Mashonda, maybe you can elaborate. Was that topics covered by our programs? If you want to elaborate, or you can also send me an email and I'll make sure you get that information. That's the Breda, PBREDA.
Yeah, I'm guessing it's this, Paul.
Okay.
So we can make sure that we get that to you. And we actually have a whole program overview piece that we send as part of a sample. So you reach out to us and we set up a time to talk to you. We can send you sample materials, including samples of the Good Grief Groups lessons, samples of the Roots to Resilience program curriculum, and we can send as part of that a whole program overview that shows you the 9-week trajectory and what is covered in those 9 weeks, if you want to dive in a little bit deeper.
Jesse, if you talk about training of the staff, whether that is individualized for the schools or training for facilitators of all the schools. So I suppose if you're in a district that has multiple elementary schools, we're really training all the elementary school facilitators all at one time. Is that?
Yeah, this is the question from Heather. Is that right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I think this is maybe about like, are we catering the program to each context that the training, or is the training look similar across all of the different to different schools? And the answer is essentially we do the training looks similar across the different schools for good grief groups, roots to resilience, et cetera. I would say where it does look a little bit different, Heather, is I talk with folks before we do professional development workshops for your broader faculty or for a focused group of people. And I will cater that content based on that particular need. So to give a couple of examples there, we did a series of professional development workshops, parent education workshops, admin training with the folks from West Windsor Plainsboro this year. And one of the things they really wanted to kind of focus on was self-care. And so we did a workshop that did introduce some of these grief and trauma-informed aspects of the program and how they can support students. But we also led them through a reflective narrative writing piece to support faculty who have also been going through a really difficult year. So if that's your question, Heather, the answer is yes, we can adapt some of our PD content based on what you're looking for. But the Good Grief Groups training, the Roots to Resilience training is a pretty standardized training based on those particular programs and onboarding people to use them. And we should say, for Good Grief Groups and Roots to Resilience, that training really is only for people that are going to implement those programs. That training is not for your broader faculty to inform them. That's what professional development is for, which is why we have these kind of two different options. Are there other questions? You've answered all the questions in there so far.
I don't see any others.
Okay, well, if there are not more questions, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to keep us moving forward here then, just to be respectful of everyone's time. As always, you can reach out to us and ask us any questions. You're going to receive an email from us tomorrow that'll have the link to the recording. It'll have some additional information about the program and how to get connected with us to learn more. But the best thing to do if you have questions about how much it's going to cost for your school or training or timing, just reach out to us. It's really easy to set up a meeting with us. We're really responsive, and we can make that happen for you really quickly. So we can walk you through that whole process. Another way for us to know that you're interested in the program and you want to learn more is to fill out this survey, both to let us know about what you thought of this webinar today, but there's a question in there about whether or not you want follow-up from us. So go ahead and click on that link that I just put into the chat, or you can use your phone. This is something I learned recently, very cool. You just open up your camera and you put it over the little QR thing, and boom, you can click and it'll open up the survey on your phone. Pretty nifty. So whatever way you'd like to do it, on your computer or on your phone, fill out that survey. It's really short, and that'll prompt us to follow up with you by you noting that you would like to learn more about the program. So please fill that out if you would. It looks like my last couple slides here disappeared, Paul, but I'm gonna just tell people verbally the last couple things here is we do offer, as most of you probably know, a lot of free webinars. And we have a few webinars coming up that are we're really excited about. Oh, there it is, it returned. So our next webinar that we're going to be doing is on Thursday, March 18th with Dr. Trevor Buser. He's going to be presenting on being present, mindfulness practices with children. Free webinar. Encourage you to join us. Trevor is great, and he's going to give you some not only background on mindfulness, but some actual strategies to implement in classrooms. On Thursday, April 22nd, our CEO, Joe Primo, is going to be presenting on spirituality of youth facing adversity. So we're going to talk about a topic that I think doesn't get addressed very often, which is
how to talk about meaning making and spirituality with young people when they're going through a really difficult experience. So that should be a really great webinar. And then last, in May, we're going to have Donna Gaffney, who's a psychologist, an author, and a speaker, come and talk about child development and grief. So grief is a color, grief is a feeling, grief is learning. What do children really know about death and grief? She's going to unpack that for us. So that one is going to be a great webinar as well. Check out our website to learn more about those dates. We will send out registration links and all of that via email as well, but we'd love to see you at a future session. Yeah, and I just want to end by saying thank you everybody so much for joining us. We really, really appreciate you taking the time to be here today. As always, you can go on our website to access some free resources, tip sheets, other content, both around COVID-19, but also generally around grief and loss. Paul, any last words before we let people go?
No, we're just happy to have the interest, and we appreciate your time and look forward to future conversations with you about bringing these to your school.
Yeah, excellent. All right. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. And looking forward to hopefully being able to connect with all of you very soon. Have a good rest of your day.
Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.